Okay, well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining. I'm State Senator Jim Gaughran, and this is another one of my town halls, which, of course, for the vast majority of this year, we have had to do them virtually because of COVID-19. And this is a lot different than most of the other town halls I have done in that this is strictly on the issue of the COVID-19 vaccine and some questions concerning it. And I am really going to be acting more as a moderator with some very distinguished doctors, medical professionals who are all Long Island leaders in healthcare. And they have graciously offered to give us their time to answer some of the questions that we've received to the extent we can. Right now, there's a lot of discussion about this vaccine. My personal view is I believe it is something that will hopefully get us past this virus. Not only that we can save lives, which of course is the most important thing that we have to try to accomplish, but also we're not going to get our society, our economy fully operating again, I believe, until we have this vaccine and it's working, and everybody can feel more comfortable out and about in society. So again, I'll be answering some of the questions, but most of them I'm going to defer to these wonderful experts, and I'm going to introduce them one at a time, just to introduce themselves and say hello. And in no particular order, I'm going to start with Dr. Eve Krief, who is the Legislative Chair, New York Chapter 2 of the American Academy of Pediatrics, Huntington Village Pediatrics.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining tonight. Thank you, Senator Gaughran, for putting together this really important topic with these wonderful experts here with us tonight. And as a general pediatrician, I know that a lot of my patients have a ton of questions, so happy to hear from everybody tonight.
All right. Thank you, Eve. And Dr. Leonard Krilov, Professor of Pediatric Infectious Disease, NYU Langone Hospital, Long Island.
Thank you, Senator Gaughran, and thanks for putting this session together. Obviously, this is the talk of our times and what we're living through. There are still a lot of unknowns, but we really are on the edge of hopefully a breakthrough with vaccine to, as you say, get this under control. So if we can add any facts or information, it's certainly a worthwhile endeavor. So thanks for putting this together.
Well, thank you. I think it's a good point. We are all learning together as this is being rolled out. There's a lot more that needs to be detailed. And next is Dr. Sharon Nachman, Chief of Division of Pediatric Infectious Diseases, Stony Brook Children's Hospital.
Good evening, and thank you for inviting me. As an academic pediatric ID doc, I'm very involved in the vaccine clinical trials and participating in the CoVPN, which is Operation Warp Speed from NIH. So I look forward to the opportunity to discuss the plans for adults and children moving forward.
Okay, and next is Dr. Sheila Nolan, MD, MSCE, Chief Pediatric Infectious Diseases, Maria Fareri Children's Hospital.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for inviting me, Senator Gaughran. It's really an exciting opportunity to be able to speak to everyone regarding these vaccines and this really momentous development in the war against this pandemic. So I'm really excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Next is Dr. Lorry Rubin, Director of Pediatric Infectious Diseases, Cohen Children's Medical Center of Northwell Health.
I'd like to say hello and welcome everyone as well, and I'm delighted to be here. It's certainly an exciting time with the vaccines just being released, and we'll have a lot to say about them.
And Dr. Rubin, you're coming in a little bit soft in terms of volume.
I think I can fix that. Is that a little better?
Let me hear you again.
Can you hear me at this point?
Yeah, it's a little bit better. But
okay, I'll work on it. Thank you.
All right, thanks. And next, Dr. Shetal Shah, President, New York Chapter 2, American Academy of Pediatrics.
Thank you, Senator Gaughran, for inviting me to this distinguished panel. I'm proud to represent New York Chapter 2 of the American Academy of Pediatrics with Dr. Krief. We are the 1,500 pediatricians across Long Island, and we're really happy to be able to get fact-based information out there to the public and be able to provide this service to people with all of their questions about the vaccine.
Well, thank you, Dr. Shah. And Dr. Uzma Syed, Infectious Disease Specialist and Chair of COVID-19 Task Force, Good Samaritan Hospital Medical Center.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Senator Gaughran. I can't express the gratitude to you for having this incredible forum to educate your constituents and the general public. I think, information is what we need to share. Unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation out there. So, we hope that all of us combined effort tonight can really get some facts out there about COVID-19 vaccines. And this really is a historical moment for all of us in our country and in the world. So we're hoping to really focus on the silver linings and get through this next difficult stretch.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Syed. Okay, and so for everybody participating, again, thank you. I want you to know that there were quite a number of questions we received, and what I did was, and my staff did, we sort of combined them into, and why did I just lose that? Okay. We sort of combined everything into one question, or I may ask 3 different questions at one time for one person to answer, and we sort of agreed that all of our doctors will, after I read the question, will, sort of jump in, taking turns, or adding, so there may be more than one doctor responding to one of the questions. And again, much of what I'm going to say is that we're still trying to figure everything out, both in this country and in the state of New York. The CDC just, was it yesterday, started to laying out sort of the priorities for different groups in issuing the vaccine, which is, still very limited, considering the size of our country. And also they're still working on, delivering everything. And of course it's during the holiday season, which is, making it even more challenging. And there's probably going to be a lot of changes as we go through that. But also I'm going to emphasize that I'm going to refer you to ny.gov/vaccine for a lot of the questions that may be asked of me, simply because I don't want to give out misinformation. And also, this is changing, every day. I just got an email today from the governor's office that he's appointed a task force of a lot of prominent citizens from around the state who are going to be responsible for overseeing and making sure that the distribution of the COVID-19 vaccine is not only done based on the science and making sure we're getting to the people who need it the most as quickly as possible, including our medical professionals, but also that it's fair. And we're certainly making sure that those communities that have traditionally been left out in our society, anytime we do anything significant, are not left behind, and everybody is treated equally in this process. So with that, I will go to the first question. Can the vaccine be given to people who are immunocompromised or immunosuppressed? And can the vaccine cause a flare-up? Or do we stump the panel here?
I can speak to that. This is,
You put us on mute.
I'm happy to speak to that. The very large studies that were done did not include patients that are immunosuppressed. That means they either have a disease that decreases their immune system function, or they're on a medication that decreases their immune system function. So that we can't directly say that the vaccine will be effective in those groups. However, the vaccine it's not contraindicated. That means we are allowed, and those individuals are allowed to take the vaccine. It's likely that the vaccine will be safe in that group, And the question is if it'll be as effective in that group as it is in other populations.
Okay.
I'd just like to point out really quickly that immunocompromised people are one of the reasons everyone should consider who is eligible to get a vaccine. If the vaccine works as we hoped, which is that it doesn't just protect you from getting the disease, but protects you potentially from being able to spread the disease even when you're asymptomatic, that will help us reduce the entire amount of circulating virus in the community and provide to some degree extra protection for those immunocompromised individuals. So it's part of our shared responsibility as well.
All right. Thank you, doctors. All right. And that, I will move on to the next question. Can people with medication allergies get the vaccine, such as people that have experienced a rash or other signs of allergic reaction after a medication?
Chime in.
Okay, go right ahead.
So, as far as the CDC guidelines and the recommendation from the ACIP, the vaccine is really being recommended for essentially everyone, except for people who have had a history of severe allergic reaction, meaning anaphylaxis to any injectables before. So by that, it's not just a simple rash, but a severe reaction where you have swelling, throat closing sensation, difficulty breathing. And if you have a history of this kind of reaction to an injectable in the past, then they are recommending that you do not go forward with the vaccine. But other than that, people with food allergies, allergies to medications, they are not being deferred from vaccination at this time.
I would agree with that and echo even further. If there's a question, you have an allergist, you can ask them, you can have it given in an office that's prepared to deal with an allergic reaction. Every vaccine, if you read the product insert, says you shouldn't get this if you've had an allergic reaction to any of the components of the vaccine. And that's actually what this says, but because of some newspaper reports suggesting allergic reaction, there's sort of a little bit of extra caution, but it would only be as said in the face of severe anaphylaxis or severe allergy.
And just to kind of close the loop, Pfizer, in fact, did something very interesting. They published available, anyone can find the clinical trial for how they developed the vaccine. And in that clinical trial has a list of the ingredients that are in the vaccine. So it is easily findable, or maybe with a little searching findable, but you can certainly look at what are the ingredients in the vaccine to see if one of the components is something that you've had a reaction to in the past. Like my colleagues on the call, I think it's really important that we shouldn't say, oh, I had an allergy, I had a stomach ache or a rash a few days after I got a medicine, I can't take it. In fact, the majority of people who actually took it probably have some allergy in the past, but it's those who anaphylax to a medication are the ones we're most concerned. But even amongst those, getting it in an office that's prepared to handle you still can be accomplished.
So it'd be fair to say that if you do have some medical, history and issues, it's probably worthwhile for you to consult your physician before you move forward.
That's
Absolutely.
a great suggestion for all of us.
Okay.
Just a reminder to the people on the call, if you don't know what anaphylaxis is, it's a type of light-threatening allergic reaction that tends to occur really temporally very close to when you receive the agent. In this case, the expectation is within 15 minutes of getting the vaccine. But the short answer is that if you don't know what anaphylaxis is, odds are you've never had it and don't need to worry about it.
What if you were stung by about 152 bees at once? You might have experienced something similar, right?
Well, even people that had reactions to bee stings, it's rare amongst those to really have true anaphylaxis.
Right.
So again, defer to speaking to your primary care doc if this would be a reason to get the vaccine, or deferred for when you get in a responsible area.
Okay. Can people with pre-existing conditions such as asthma, diabetes, or heart disease get the vaccine?
Not only can they probably should be more interested, because those are also risk factors for developing severe response if you are infected with this virus. So There, again, as mentioned, even immunocompromised, it's not a live vaccine, and it should be safe and would be in their best interest.
So
And I'm sorry, go ahead, Doctor.
I just want to remind everyone that part of the FDA proceedings, each company actually had to prepare tables that said how many patients enrolled on the study that had diabetes, how many had asthma, how many were obese, and what age groups each of them were. So in fact, the FDA saw data that looks at just people who look just like you and I. And those are the people who they vaccinated. Those are the ones who they looked at for safety. And those are the ones who they looked at for efficacy.
And it may also be that this question might, because we combine several questions, might also be folks with asthma, diabetes, or heart disease. Will they be given a higher priority in terms of when they would get the vaccine, which kind of dovetails into another question. How will the age groups, example, people over 75, be notified of the vaccination availability and locations? How do I know what priority group I'm to be vaccinated? I'm in to be vaccinated. Do you know how people will be notified about signing up to get it and find out where they will be getting it? I think a lot of those questions are still to be worked out. Again, we know the state is working, off the CDC guidelines, which, again, just yesterday, laid out a timeline. It's basically based on the supply of vaccines to some extent. By the end of this week, New York is scheduled to have received 633 doses of both the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine. But there's 2 million New Yorkers in phase 1, which includes our healthcare personnel, long-term care facility residents. And then that's 1A. And then 1B, we get the frontline essential workers and persons 75 years and older. I've been talking to some folks in state government who, these guidelines and timetables are being given based on their understanding of what they think the flow of the supply is going to be. They're hopeful that if the supply, moves smoothly and we rapidly get more and more, being in a 1A category may mean that obviously you get it as soon as possible. It may not take that long to get to 1B and then to get to, 1C and some of the other categories. That the hope is that, as this rolls out, and of course we're all seeing on television the issues with making sure at least the Pfizer has the right temperature and various issues like that. I don't. Do you have anyone have anything to add in terms of the timing of this and the different categories? Okay.
But I think that just the priority is, to get as much vaccine out as quickly as possible. So as soon as the doses come, I think everybody is going to be doing their best to get the, very top priority people vaccinated. And as soon as we can, keep going down the tiers to the, each next group. It seems as though the government is very focused on, not storing the vaccine and getting it out and getting it into people and everybody who wants it as quickly as possible.
And again, going to ny.gov/vaccine, I think can answer many of the questions, but I'm also offering that anybody can contact my office by phone or by email if you have specific questions and and concerns. For example, one of the issues questions we're going to have coming up is about group homes, and I had questions the other day about folks who are home health care workers, because as many people are not going to nursing homes now because of the issues we've had with COVID. So there's a larger population of older folks and younger folks who have issues requiring nursing home attention that may be home getting home health care. And so, so we're happy to, try to get the right answers for you. And in some cases, we've even seen that we brought brought issues to the attention of the governor's office and the health department with some of these logistics. The next question is, can the vaccine combine with or alter my DNA in any way? Who's the scientist here?
Simple answer is no, but go ahead, Sharon.
I'll take the hit on that one, guys. So it's really important to think about what the vaccine is and what it can do. This is a messenger RNA vaccine, which means while it can enter the cell, it can't go any further. It doesn't enter the nucleus. It doesn't really get stuck to your DNA of your cell. And once that messenger RNA or that message has been read and it's made a protein, the message is finished and done. It doesn't sit around, it doesn't kind of sneak in or go into any other part of your cell's machinery. So that messenger RNA is seen as foreign by your body. It gets knocked off and destroyed, and it never actually enters your cell. So the questions that I've been hearing about with fertility, et cetera, and entering your cell or the host actually can't happen. It's like taking a football and putting it into the cell and thinking it's going to change your nucleus or your DNA of your body. It simply can't.
Okay,
Yeah, the
thank you very
Pfizer
much.
studies are very clear about this. And I just want to emphasize this point because a lot of pediatricians are sort of seeing what's out there in the social media landscape. And this tends to be a very common refrain across multiple social media platforms. The RNA that is injected as part of the vaccine, the mRNA, is degraded within approximately 6 hours based on laboratory studies. And it's also important to remember that our body degrades our own mRNA after it's served its purpose all the time. So we're really not doing anything particularly novel from a biomechanical cellular process then our body isn't always doing all the time. So in that sense, while it is, obviously a breakthrough in terms of helping us fight the pandemic, we're really not asking our body to do anything that it doesn't normally do.
Okay, thanks, Shetal. Next question about the group homes. When will the staff and residents for group homes occupied by mentally disabled receive COVID-19 vaccine? So again, this is not perfect the way this is being rolled out, and some tough decisions I think have been made in terms of the CDC and then the state implementing. But I know they want to try to implement as quickly as possible to everybody. So my understanding is the very first, and those that are getting everything now as quickly as possible, are the high-risk healthcare workers, and then the nursing home residents and staff. They will be followed by long-term and congregate care staff and residents and our first responders and other healthcare workers. And, these are the group homes I know have been hit very hard in particular because in many cases you can't explain social distancing to some of the clients who are there. And I know there's been a high rate of infection among, these wonderful folks who work to assist these people in group homes. So hopefully they'll just quickly get to that category. The same thing where, I brought to the attention, the governor's office, and they've said that they're going to, really push to move quickly to our emergency medical professionals, many of whom are volunteers in our EMS squads and our fire departments, and many of the folks who volunteer are people who are also older and have to be a little more concerned than younger folks with this virus. So my hope is that the frontline healthcare and the nursing homes get taken care of real fast so that this next group can be taken care of. Does anybody want to add anything?
I just wanted to say that having people call their primary care docs and saying, when's my appointment? When can I get it? When can I get it? Is tying up a lot of time on the office staff. But unfortunately, those offices can't tell their patients when they're getting it. And we defer to you, as well as our other state legislators, to tell us when will stuff be released, when will it come to those providers, those other situations that are not the hospital and the nursing homes. Calling your practitioner won't necessarily help. We are all anxious to hear. And like you, we're waiting to get more vaccine to the state so it can be doled out.
Okay. Oh, absolutely. I think we sort of dealt with the next question. If you are a person with underlying conditions and an essential worker, not police or fire, when and where will the vaccine be available, and who should we contact, employer or doctor? So my hope is, as the vaccines, the supply increases and more people in this, 1A are taken care of, and then the 1B, that'll be a lot clearer in terms of the public information that we'll be able to give out, and that will be on, the governor's site and health department's site to make it a lot clearer. Again, essential workers who are not police or fire, I basically get to 1C. 1C is when you will have people who are, I guess, between 65 and 74 years, then people 16 to 64 with high-risk conditions, and then the essential workers who weren't in the earlier category. But again, we are going to continue to bring information to the governor's office, and often there's things that they didn't think about as this gets rolled out more and more. Okay. Should pregnant women receive the COVID vaccine?
So I can start with this one. Pregnant women were not included in the initial vaccine trials, but we do know that pregnant women seem to be at a bit of higher risk for more severe disease with COVID. So, based on all the safety data, and as Dr. Nachman has sort of spoken about the biologics of the way the vaccine enters the cell and that sort of thing. Everything points to this vaccine being, incredibly safe, and because of the higher risk of more severe disease in pregnant women. I will tell you, at our hospital, we have had some extraordinarily ill moms, and it's been really scary to see. And so, I think based on the science and the safety data on these vaccines thus far, and we talk about these vaccines again being new, but the mRNA technology has been around for really 20 years, and been in vaccine candidates and used in cancer patients and used in other vaccine trials for many years. And though not specifically studied in pregnant women, because there's actually so little in this vaccine that can cause a problem, I think they're extraordinarily safe vaccines. And as I've gotten this question many times from nurses in my facility, and from other friends and that sort of thing. And I always say, if it was, I'm not planning to get pregnant anytime soon, but if it was my sister, or I would absolutely recommend that they, if they were pregnant or planning to get pregnant, that they get this vaccine.
Follow up on that in a little bit different tack. Because of concerns about both the pregnant woman and changes physiologically in protecting the mother, there's been a historical hesitancy to give anything, including vaccines, to pregnant women. And we've learned over the last 20 years with the success of influenza immunization in pregnant women and DTaP pertussis vaccine to pregnant women that it can be done safely. So to piggyback that on to what Dr. Nolan said, yes, we need some more data, and the studies are being started, but there's every reason to think it would be safe, and we have shown in the field that we can immunize pregnant women safely. So I think this is a need and something that will be happening, but for obvious reasons, there was a little bit more caution in coming to this step.
I just want to add one more thing. I agree with Dr. Nolan, Dr. Krilov, and I think all the larger societies, the Society for Obstetrics and Maternal Fetal Medicine, even American Academy of Pediatrics, has come out in support of vaccinations for pregnant women. I think one thing that people need to keep in mind, it's the individual decision that needs to be made with consultation with your physician. We are definitely recommending that for the most part we have seen that pregnancy can predispose people to worse and more severe COVID-19. As Dr. Nolan mentioned, we have seen this firsthand, but that pregnant women should keep in mind that some of the effects from the vaccine that are very common, and not very common, but more common that you can see for up to 48 hours after vaccination is something as simple as a fever. So in pregnancy, that fever can be a little dangerous. So we do recommend that pregnant women do use Tylenol and things like that to bring the fever down. So again, it needs to be in consultation with your physician, but just to keep in mind that a fever after vaccination is not unusual, but it is something that self-resolves. But in pregnancy, we definitely need to bring attention to that to make sure that that fever is brought down.
I wanted to add something that I was asked recently, which is regarding the preservatives that are in the vaccine, or the question that people were worried about thimerosal or mercury-containing preservatives, with the idea that that's not something that they want in their bodies or while they're pregnant for their babies. And the important thing to remember here is that there is no thimerosal or preservative either in the Moderna vaccine or the Pfizer vaccine. And how do we know it? Because the shelf life can be measured in minutes and hours. Once you open the vaccine, you have to use it right away. It will not sit in the refrigerator. It can't sit out. So even if it is a multi-dose vial, meaning a few people can get their doses from a single vial, when you open it, you have to use it right away. There are no preservatives. There is no thimerosal, no mercury-containing, heavy metal, all the questions that we've all been seeing. And therefore, that is another reason to think that it is safe in pregnant women as well as in children looking ahead.
You're muted, Senator.
Okay. This because the dog was barking. Can nursing moms be vaccinated with the COVID vaccine?
And answer that. Yes, I would say that if I had any hesitation at all in pregnant women, which I don't, certainly for nursing moms, it's even less of a concern. Of course, nursing moms receive all vaccines that they're supposed to have without regard to the fact that they're nursing. So that should be considered a perfectly safe intervention.
Okay, thank you. Has this type of vaccine previously been used on the SARS virus, and were there problems with it?
So not previously on the SARS virus. There is an Ebola candidate that was issued an emergency authorization for it, and it's been used, as I said, in cancer patients. There were also some mRNA Zika and rabies virus candidates and vaccine candidates, and so it's been used in clinical trials for numerous different types of things, and this has been since the initial SARS pandemic. People sort of think of this warp speed, but this warp speed designation has been in the works essentially before even that SARS pandemic. We know that these viruses can appear every once in a while and cause pandemics, and so the infectious disease and scientific communities have been preparing for a pandemic for a long time, and had sort of that not been in place really since before the initial SARS pandemic in early 2000s, we would never have been able to get these vaccines up and going. I mean, right now the World Health Organization's website says there are over 230 candidates of different vaccines in production and under study. So that's just a sort of phenomenal and amazing response. And so fortunately, although it wasn't used specifically specifically for the SARS virus initially, I think, we were lucky that that virus did not spread the way this virus has spread, but it did sort of tip us off to being, starting to get prepared. And over the last 2 decades, we really have been preparing and ready to handle this virus. And, although for a traditional vaccine, this has gone very quickly, it's really continued to be rigorously studied and met all the safety and efficacy requirements that we hold so stringently for all our vaccines. So I think it's it's an amazing technology and extraordinarily safe, and will really make an enormous difference in shutting down this pandemic.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. All right, I'm going to combine 2 questions. After being administered the vaccine, can someone still be a transmitter of COVID-19 without exhibiting symptoms? And the other is, if I had COVID already, should I still get the vaccine?
I can start. So to start with the second part, although we don't completely know, there have been some cases of individuals getting second cases of COVID. And so there is a consideration if you're more than 90 days from your COVID infection, you could and would be eligible to receive vaccine. As to the first part, again, if you could repeat.
After you get the vaccine, can you still be a transmitter of it without exhibiting symptoms?
So not completely studied to date, the potential that you might get some asymptomatic infection or milder, but if you did, presumably you would shed less virus and for much less time. So I can't say absolutely you wouldn't be potentially able to transmit it. So if you've been vaccinated, yes, you still need to, while we're in the throes of this, follow the precautions of social distancing and mask wearing. This isn't an excuse that suddenly it's all over and I'm free. But the risk would likely be dramatically less than if you weren't vaccinated and got infected.
I think that's a really important point that I just want to piggyback on, is that, this mass vaccination campaign is going to take some time. We have a population of 330 million people just in our country. So until we reach that herd immunity, I think it's really important for people to realize that just getting the vaccine doesn't mean that you can kind of forego all of our good infection prevention measures. Masks are here to stay for some time now, and this is not similar to influenza that people are used to. So we have to remember that because there is asymptomatic transmission of the virus, we need to make sure that until we can 100% prove that that is not that's not happening, not taking place still once people are vaccinated, that we need to make sure we protect everybody until that herd immunity is really achieved. And as far as people that have had COVID-19 before, as Dr. Krilov mentioned, there is that 90-day deferment of vaccination. But once you're past that, we really are urging people to really get vaccinated, even if you've had COVID-19, because the immunity is going to be more robust and more long-term with vaccination. So we really are urging that. And, reinfections, although rare, can be more severe. And, as we go farther along in this pandemic, we may be seeing more and more reinfections. So we want to make sure that we are protecting everybody.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. Somebody read somewhere that the COVID vaccine might cause infertility. Is that true?
So the answer is there's no data, both on the animal model as well as on the human model, to say that the virus specifically would cause infertility. When we think about how viruses enter cells, they have to have a certain receptor or a place on the cell that they can enter and cause their damage. So there's nothing suggestive of the cells associated with fertility that would make us think that they would be higher risk for being attacked by the virus. Certainly, the vaccine would have no place in the discussion about a worry for fertility, because that's not the job of the vaccine. It doesn't get to those cells. Again, we've talked about how messenger RNA doesn't enter the cell and stay there and change your DNA. So both on the virus side we haven't had any data. And on the vaccine side, we certainly have no reason to expect that that would be a possibility.
I'd just like to add that in the Pfizer trial, much of the data which has now been available online, the women who were involved in the trial had to sign a form saying that they were using 2 forms of birth control, yet 15 of them in the immunization group, the group that we know got the vaccine, wound up getting pregnant. So I think that's a pretty strong statement about how the vaccine is not in any way associated with infertility. Those rates of pregnancy were slightly lower than the rates of pregnancy in the control group, but the rates of the control group didn't have as much adherence with the contraceptive policies. So I think that's really important. But I think that that's part of what has fed this persistent rumor about the vaccine and infertility.
In the Moderna trial, there were equal amounts of women, similar to the Pfizer study, that also got pregnant. So once you've entered a clinical trial, the hope is that you will stay in that trial for 2 years. So while it's too soon to say anything about those pregnancies and those infants who will be born, those women will still be staying on the study and those pregnancies will follow. And I want to say, somewhat tongue-in-cheek, I expect that we'll see more pregnancies in the next few months from women enrolled on both the Pfizer trial as well as the Moderna trial. That would be expected and not a surprise, and those pregnancies too will be followed. As Dr. Shah is suggesting, there's no reason for us to expect that in any way, either the virus or the vaccine is associated with any higher risk of infertility.
Okay, thank you. Do you think children will need to get the vaccine if trials show it's safe for them to get?
No.
So I think there's a lot that we don't necessarily know about children in this virus. I think there's a lot of very minimally and symptomatic children who've had the virus, and plenty of children who have not had the virus, or who've had the virus and had no symptoms whatsoever. And so there is potentially, although we know that people who have symptoms are more likely to spread, we do suspect that children probably play somewhat of a role in asymptomatic spread of the virus. And so really, in order to achieve, herd immunity and keep this virus completely in check, children will most likely need to be vaccinated in order to really control the numbers as well. We'll see, but at this point, again, the trials are still to be done in children, and I know the companies anticipate starting them in the coming year. But hopefully by protecting those at most risk for severe disease, we will be able to have some control over the virus. But in order to really, thwart this pandemic, we will likely need the vast majority of people to have immunity to the virus, and whether that's being vaccinated or whether that's having the disease itself.
If I can just add, I completely agree, but I just wanted to add, I think the question sort of raised one of my pet peeves about immunization discussions in general, and it was, do they need to be immunized? I would switch it, should they be immunized for their good, for society's need. I always worry about it sounding draconian and being mandated. Immunizations are one of the greatest public health developments, and the advocacy should be because it's the right thing to do, not because it needs to be done. Sorry, it's a pet peeve.
The good news is, though, the vaccine trials that will be done in children will not have to be as large as the efficacy studies that were done in adults. Each of the adult studies needed 30,000, 40,000 or so more patients enrolled on them. The trials in children will look at a surrogate marker or an endpoint. What was their immune titer? How high was it and how long did it last? So the good news is the enrollment numbers that are needed for each of the companies to say that vaccine is safe in children will be much smaller, which means they can enroll quickly. And hopefully by the end of this year, or before school starts in the fall, we will have that information about vaccines, the dose and the interval, and how high the immune response is in children.
Well, thank you very much. When I get my groceries delivered, I wipe them down, with antibacterial wipes. Is this necessary? I wipe down my mail with wipes. Is that necessary?
I would say that's probably not necessary. We, in the very beginning, we didn't know as much about transmission of this virus, but we now know that the virus is spread mostly by a respiratory route. That means from droplets from one person speaking to another person. Occasionally it's spread a little bit further than the 3 to 6 feet from one person to another. Although if I cough into my hand and I touch a doorknob and 30 seconds later somebody else touches that doorknob, theoretically they may be able to acquire the virus in that way. I think worrying about your mail and worrying about deliveries is over the top in terms of worrying about transmission of this virus.
We've learned a lot in the last year. What do my 11 and 16-year-old grandsons and their parents need to do or not do to protect them from contracting COVID-19?
I'll try and take this one.
I was going to say, you could be Dr. Fauci.
So, I've really been emphasizing to patients right now and families that it's super important that we really kind of stick to our immediate households right now and keep our intermingling with other families to a minimum. Although the schools have been safe now because they are 6 feet apart and they're wearing masks, I'm seeing a lot of families that are having play dates outside of school and participating in their sports activities as usual. And we just can't really do those kind of things right now, especially as the numbers start to spike around the country and here locally. So we're really encouraging parents to get really creative, have those virtual play dates, move things outdoors as much as possible. We really discourage kids from getting together indoors with friends. You're seeing a lot of spread that way, not so much in the schools, but outside of schools with older children, hanging out together, in town, maybe not wearing a mask when they're out together, and younger children having play dates together, not necessarily being able to stay 6 feet apart, so they need to be supervised. So now more than ever, it's really, really important that everybody wear a mask when we're with anybody that's not in our immediate family, to keep those activities outdoors, to really not have indoor activities with other people who are not in our immediate families, including close relatives. Because you have to think that if you're with a close relative, you're with everybody in their family and everybody that their family's potentially been in contact with. So, I've just seen, especially after Thanksgiving, we've seen, multiple spreads through families that had Thanksgiving together. And, it's just becoming really not safe. So get creative, think of activities you can do outside, limit contacts with other families, wear masks, continue social distancing, wash hands frequently, plan activities for children outdoors as much as possible, keep them connected to family and friends virtually. But it's really important right now to really get much more vigilant than maybe people were over the summer when numbers started to drop a little bit locally and we let our guard down a little bit and we saw things were okay, but we're really seeing the numbers start to rise now. So it's super important to stay vigilant.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. This next question, as we know, vaccines and public policy have been highly debated in this country and certainly in New York in recent years since I've been in the Senate. And I know there's a lot of folks that are just against vaccines altogether for a variety of different reasons. But I think this question gets to the heart of others who have not had any problems with, vaccines for themselves or for their children, with other, medical issues. The question is, these vaccines are so new and seem to be rushed through. How can we trust these vaccines?
Well, I think I spoke to this a little bit before. They
You
are
did,
new in a
yes.
way, but this technology has been around for more than 20 years, and really, the beautiful thing about this is mRNA is in your body all the time, and is a key component to your body functioning the way it normally should, and it doesn't last, as we've said again and again. And so and there's no preservatives in these vaccines. There's they're encapsulated in this little lipid particle that it has to be in order to get into the cell, but they're from a scientific and biologic standpoint, they're dramatically, safe, and I think there's really very limited things to be worried about. And the trials that have been done, these 30,000, 40,000 patient trials, have really had some of the most, amazing safety profiles that we've ever seen in any vaccine trials. So, I think. I will tell you, I've worked in vaccines, I worked in vaccine development, and I've worked in vaccine clinical trials. And when this data came out from Pfizer and Moderna, I almost started crying. I was so excited. I had no expectation that these vaccines would be as safe and efficacious as they are. And I think this is going to help end this pandemic.
I think I just want to chime in, a complete agreement there, but also want people to realize that there is so much transparency in this process that people may not be aware of. Things have been essentially out there for everyone to see. The vaccine pharmaceutical companies have been, listing their clinical trials on their website and access the data. There are independent bodies that are reviewing, independent committees that have been reviewing all the data to make sure that it is and efficacious. All the checks and balances are in place, and I think people can rest assured to know that the safety of these vaccines has not been compromised in any of this process. The great thing that's coming out of this is the advancement in science. Science on our side is what has gotten us to this point.
Okay, thank you, doctors. If you receive the COVID-19 vaccines, is it a one-time vaccine or will you need to get it yearly? Do we know how long the vaccine is protective for?
So unfortunately, we don't have that answer yet. But that doesn't mean we're not looking for it. So right now, the vaccine antibody tests seem to be as high as they were early into the study, as well as the most recent time they've been looked at, which right now is at least 6 months, maybe longer for those who are in the phase 1 and 2. Having said that, the people that enrolled in those studies will be getting their blood tested pretty much every 3 to 6 months for the entire 2 years, and even perhaps beyond. So we will know the answer as long as those people keep coming back and we can keep checking their blood. When we compare it though to the antibody titers after native disease, it does seem that the response to the vaccine gives you a higher titer response. And it looks like it may be lasting longer. When we look at the people who had COVID disease, about a third of them seem to lose their antibody pretty quickly. That has not happened at all to anyone who's been on a study. So both from keep following, as well as what's happened to native disease, the vaccine is starting to look like a better and better bet than allowing anyone to get the infection.
All right, thank you. What side effects does the COVID vaccine have? I think there was some discussion of that. I don't know if anybody wants to add.
Sure, I can mention some things. We want to differentiate serious adverse effects. So that's developing a new disease or something like that in the period after vaccination from side effects that happen within a day or two after vaccination. So this is side effects are common with this vaccine, and people should expect to get a sore arm, and a certain percentage of people will get fatigued or muscle ache. Again, it lasts only a day or two, and a small proportion of people may get a fever. So it's a reactogenic vaccine, and of course an extremely effective vaccine. But I want to make sure people don't confuse that with the safety profile that everybody on the call has been speaking about, that in terms of following these individuals for about 2 months after the second dose, there hasn't emerged any serious events that happen, which is bound to happen in a population of 40,000 people, were no more common in the vaccine recipients than in those that got the placebo injection.
And people should also know that those side effects might be more common after the second dose when your immune system is further boosted. There were much more common side effects after the second dose with fever in 20%. of people, but it's to be expected. So as long as people know that that's just your immune response, acting, your body's immune system reacting to the vaccine and it's protecting you, as long as they expect that, they shouldn't be alarmed.
Okay. Next question, I guess, is mostly for me. How will you build trust in the vaccine if trust in government is at an all-time low? And how can we prevent the COVID vaccine from being politicized? Well, that's why I think it's, so important that we listen to the scientists, we listen to the doctors, both at the national level and locally here on Long Island, people that know what they're doing, who don't have political motives, just want to try to, save lives and help us become as a society a lot healthier, a lot quicker. I think also, as it relates to the vaccine, the bipartisan nature of it. I mean, I love the fact that we had the Vice President of the United States publicly took the vaccine the other day, and the President, former Vice President, President-elect, did it today. This should not be a political issue, just like, we shouldn't be politicizing the wearing of a mask, but, we are dealing with that today, and I think that's why it's important. The more information that is given out by professionals and scientists, and certainly our healthcare professionals, and less from politicians, probably the better. And then how can we prevent the vaccine from being politicized? I think that's why I say the CDC in their study went through a whole ethical review because they had to make decisions of who gets it first and who gets it later. And the governor today has appointed a task force that's going to make sure that communities, who are, underrepresented historically, that they're equally receiving the vaccine in the priority order that they should, as individual citizens, based on the different levels of rolling this out that has been issued. I mean. But yeah, we already get calls, people, hey, can you get us the vaccine? And, there should be no, politics in terms of who gets ahead of the line. In fact, that probably brings me, I'll just jump to a later question because it's related. My son is an EMT. Why are politicians like members of Congress getting the vaccine before he is? I understand the president, VP, president-elect, and VP-elect and the line of success in getting it. But why are members of Congress getting it before my son and his fellow EMTs and frontline health care workers? I actually agree with that. And, I think there also is this issue as if you are a public leader, it's helpful, or a public figure, for some folks to be getting the vaccine and highlighting it, even if they're, not, jumping the line. I mean, I saw yesterday that the one public figure who years ago was very instrumental in helping to get everybody to take the polio vaccine was Elvis. So maybe, celebrity folks taking the vaccine, if it helps to move this along, makes a lot of sense. I know we don't have a similar order, for the state legislature, for myself or the governor. I think the governor has said just today that he wanted to wait his turn. I have no problem with the governor getting the vaccine now because I think he's the governor and he's a leader, and I think he can promote it. I don't think there's going to be an awful lot of people that are going to see me take a vaccine ahead of anyone else, and that it's going to dramatically change public policy. I do think that I want to make sure that those healthcare workers and the EMTs and firefighters that are out there, our police officers, who are coming into contact a lot more, that they often have to go into situations that they're forced to go into because of what's going on with their occupation. I think they should get it first. I can figure out how to stay safe and just follow the normal guidelines, and then I'll find out where I get it along, and based on my age and health and everything else. Does anybody want to add to that, or?
Well, I think I'd love to hear you say that, and certainly I think we all agree, and it's hard to have to make these ethical decisions as a society, as a profession. But I think the other thing I'd add is I hope this is a short-term problem, because I hope whether it's 3 months, 4, 6 months, supply will be ramped up, and then everybody will have access, and that's obviously the longer-term goal. And with other vaccine candidates in the pipeline to add to that, so we're better able to take care of all of us.
Yeah, Senator, I think you made a very important point when you talked about role modeling and the importance of being a role model when it comes to infection control practices. One of the most common things, just to forecast maybe 3 to 6 months ahead of time, and just to address a lot of the hesitancy and the skepticism that is out there, one of the things that we as physicians often get when we discuss things with parents or patients is they will turn to us and say, you know, what would you do? If it was your child, what would you do? Or if it was for Dr. Syed, who sees adult patients, if it was your sister or mother, what would you do? We also know that one of the most effective things that pediatricians can do in a short amount of time to convince parents that vaccines are safe is to remind them that they are vaccinated and that their children are vaccinated. So while we're on this webinar and while we have this panel of experts, I would just like to I know it's a little bit of a stunt, so I apologize, but if vaccines are available to all of you, how many of you have either already gotten your COVID vaccine or intend to get COVID vaccine? Just show of hands so that everyone's there. Assuming
I'll get mine.
I haven't gotten it yet, but definitely want to.
Of course, right. So I think that really, I mean, for all of the people who are listening out there, that should be perhaps the strongest possible recommendation, right? The fact that all of these physicians, you've spent countless hours studying the data that's out there, looking at the risks, looking at the benefits, taking care of patients with COVID, have really looked at everything and are recommending the vaccine not only for themselves, but for their loved ones. So if you take anything home from this hour, you know, remember that.
If I could just add to that, in vaccinology in general, and would say here as well, the choice to not vaccinate is the choice to risk disease. And so I think you have to look at what the disease is and what we're trying to prevent, and then realize the safety and efficacy checks that have already been done with the vaccine. And hopefully that will also help you realize the great benefits that's in front of us.
All right, thank you, doctors. Can employers mandate vaccination? I think that's more of a legal question. I think under federal law, employers, do have there are some rights, because first of all, they have an obligation to protect their other employees. They also have, potential liabilities too, in terms of the workplace and people getting sick unnecessarily because of the spread of any sort of disease. But I think also similarly they would have to make accommodations for anybody who might have it also. As you would have to make accommodations for other folks who might have some disabilities or medical issues. I think that's going to be a very, very probably even litigated issue down the road. But we'll see what happens next with that. And so that ends the initial questions I have. I know we have some that have been coming in on Facebook. How many strains are covered in the vaccine?
So the vaccine only covers the coronavirus or COVID, SARS-CoV-2 that is circulating now. It doesn't matter if there's reports of mutations and some concerns about mutations. Essentially, all of the coronaviruses that are circulating now are really related to one specific coronavirus, and that's what the vaccine is targeting.
Okay, thank you very much. How will healthcare practitioners in private practice who are not affiliated with a hospital system get access to the vaccine? I am a psychologist seeing patients in person throughout the pandemic and are concerned about exposing my clients.
Yeah, it's likely that the vaccine for the foreseeable future will be administered in what can be referred to as pods. That is, freestanding areas that have the vaccine, and when you're eligible based on your risk criteria, your 1A, 1B, 1C, will get it. One of the reasons for that is, as Dr. Nachman mentioned, once the vial's opened, it is only good for a few hours, and these are multiple dose vaccines, so we don't want to waste vaccine. So it's likely that it'll be many months before the vaccine is, for example, in an individual physician's offices. It'll probably be available across the island in different pods where you would go to get that vaccine.
But I think all medical professionals do come ahead of the general public, regardless of what they're doing. Next question is, when will the vaccine be widely available to the general public? I guess that's sort of, we got the 1A, 1B, 1C, and then 2. So I guess sort of like 4 different categories. And do we have a guess when is that? I hear March, I hear July.
Probably.
What's your guess?
My best guess is we're looking at the summer before we'll have enough stock. And I just want to remind people that up until now, we've been talking about the Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna vaccine. But it's important to recognize that Operation Warp Speed has many vaccines in the queue. So there are 2 vaccines that have already enrolled their entire population, the AstraZeneca product as well as the Janssen or the J&J product. Those are both now fully enrolled, 48,000, 30,000 in each of those studies. They're going to have to look at their data. They're going to have to present it to a safety monitoring board, and then to the FDA, and then to the Advisory Council on Immunization Practice from CDC. So it is hopeful that some of those, or perhaps both of those, will also get an EUA approval and then move out to the population, because no one vaccine manufacturer or 2, or perhaps even 3, will have enough of a supply to vaccinate not only the US, but worldwide, which is what we're all talking about now. So with time, more vaccine products will be completed on their studies, will be available, and will move out to the public. And when you kind of start adding one plus another, that accelerates when vaccine will be available for the general population. So if we only had to rely on 2, it would be months and months until we would see enough. If we have 3 or 4 or perhaps even 5, that timeline starts getting shorter and shorter for everyone to have access to a vaccine.
Okay,
just a quick caveat, because Dr. Nachman did mention the multiple vaccines that are available or that will be available. As of now, the recommendation is that if you start with one product, because these are a 2-dose series, as of now, the recommendation is that you end with the same product that you start with. I think that's going to be extremely important moving forward, because if people started with the Pfizer vaccine and then, God forbid, there's a supply shortage and there's more Moderna than there is Pfizer, you're going to have a lot of people clamoring to potentially switch products. But we are not we're not at the point where we can say that mixing and matching of the vaccines products is the right thing to do. We do know that there are other types of vaccines where that is acceptable in the childhood immunization series, but not for these vaccines. So I think that that's an important point for the listeners to know about.
Okay, thank you, doctors. This is a good question, and I don't have the answer to it. Maybe others do. Where do clergy fit on the priority list as essential providers? Honestly, I think that's something I need to, bring to the attention of the governor's office and see what their thoughts are on that, because during this, during this pandemic, people have been reaching out more and more, spiritually, and I think it's and certainly it's the obligation of our faith leaders and our clergy to assist people as much as they can, and also with the rise in mental health issues. Also, I think we really should try to find a way to give a priority to our religious leaders as essential workers. So thank you very much, Rabbi, for that call. We're going to follow up tomorrow, and we'll see what sort of an answer we can get. Why do questions need to be submitted before a Zoom call? Well, I mean, they don't have to be submitted before the Zoom call. We just offer that opportunity. People are busy. If you want to, send in a question, we'll put it on a list, and then, we ask the question. One of the other things that we can do is we can get to more questions, because, some of these questions, 15, 20 people, listed had the same sort of question. So we're able to, to combine it. Also with something, very critical and technical as this, in some cases when we got them early, we were able to try to get some answers out of, say the health department, the governor's office, or and again, we're taking questions now, including from this viewer. So I do much prefer the live town halls I've done, where we can have the interaction one-on-one, and hopefully we will get back to that soon. When we get past this virus, even when I'm being yelled at and shouted at. I think that's part of our democratic society as your representative in the state Senate. But until we're all in a safer place, we're going to just have to improvise with these town halls. Good question. With the 2-shot vaccine, what's the timeline between the 2 shots?
So it's a little different for the 2 products, and it's based on the way they were studied. So for the Pfizer vaccine, 3 weeks apart. For the Moderna, 4 weeks apart. That's how they were studied, and that's the recommended schedule. It is also said, which is said for other vaccines, something happened and you didn't get it quite on time, still go get that second dose, and the first dose would still count. That's the best guidance we can give, I think.
Okay, thank you. Once you are vaccinated, how many days does it take to develop an immunity? When is it safe to return to work? First vaccination or booster? I don't know, is that second shot considered technically a booster? That's my question as well.
Well, so the second dose is essentially sort of part of the primary series,
Right.
but its point is to boost the immune response of the first dose. But as far as going back to work, as long as you feel well and able to do your job, you can go back to work, the next day or that same day. I'm sorry, I think there was another piece of the question that I lost. No?
How many days after the vaccine are you getting protection? So from the studies, it really looks like about a week or 2 weeks after you've gotten that second vaccine that you're really in that efficacy of 95%. On the other hand, I was kind of thinking that, were they asking if they go back to work, they don't need a mask? And the answer to that is an obvious no. You will definitely need a mask when you go back to work. So while the vaccine is wonderfully effective and safe, as we've been discussing, we still don't want to put you in a risky environment and say, don't wear a mask. So yes, get your vaccine, but please don't stop wearing a mask, doing the hand sanitizing and the social distancing. All of that will still be needed even after you've been vaccinated, until we have enough of the population and can beat this virus down.
And to just piggyback, I think inherent in what we've said, this is a messenger RNA that codes for one protein of the virus. It is not live. You cannot get COVID from the vaccine. You can't transmit it from the vaccine. The issues of safety, as Dr. Nachman just raised, and maintaining it, and that we don't know it 100% protects you from getting virus elsewhere and shedding it, even if it makes it milder. We have to continue the precautions.
Okay, thank you. By the way, we're getting a bunch of comments from people, and some of which are praising many of you by name. So I want you to know you are all great, and we're all grateful. and those, but instead of reading those comments right now, I'm going to move up. We got a bunch more questions, so I'm going to keep with the questions. But thank you for those comments, all of you who have sent them in. Any news on the possible new strain of the virus that is coming out of the United Kingdom? I was actually going to ask that myself if it came up. Thoughts?
So I'll just chime in and say that, mutations and changes in coronaviruses are not unusual. And we've had these mutations before. This is a new one that's been picked up. And because they have much more surveillance capacity and genetic testing that they do, phylogenetic testing that they do on the SARS-CoV-2 in the UK that they had picked this up, we don't know the implications of this just yet. There is a possibility that it could be more transmissible, but we don't necessarily think that it's, responsible for more severe disease. So we're just waiting to see right now, but, I think people should just sit tight and, let the science lead and let all the scientists do their work before we get carried away. But the important thing to remember, though, is that, this kind of highlights the fact that, we are in the midst of the most difficult pandemic, with the holidays approaching, with people traveling. We really have to remember that, this is the most difficult time, and we really need to try to avoid unnecessary travel. We know how this virus transmits indoors in crowded gatherings. So, whatever we can do to limit that kind of environment and that kind of exposure, we really need to do that now, because, we have some good news with the vaccines, and this is a very difficult stretch for us to just get through this final stretch so that we can finally beat this, and have this pandemic behind us.
I think the only thing to that, and I agree with everything Dr. Syed just said, is that it doesn't look like it's a change in the part of the protein generated by the vaccine. So nothing to suggest that this new strain is going to put a crimp in the efficacy of the vaccine. And I think that's also important.
Okay, next question I think was sort of answered, but maybe elaborate. This one could. How long will the immunity last for?
So as we've said a bit earlier, right now it looks like from all the testing they've done on the patients that were enrolled in the phase 1 or 2 and now the phase 3, every time they're checking it, they're still seeing a good titer of antibody or immune response to the vaccine. While that's only 6 months at the longest right now, that's still better than some people had a response to the illness itself. But time will tell how long that will last, and whether we'll need a booster at a year or booster at 2 years remains unknown. But if we don't control the pandemic now, we're not going to get to that point of asking the question.
Okay, here's an interesting question. Should there be a delay between a flu vaccine and a COVID vaccine?
So yes, the recommendation is for 14 days before or after a COVID vaccine that you delay vaccination. So if you just recently got your flu vaccine, you need to wait at least 14 days to get your COVID vaccine. Or if you've just gotten a COVID vaccine, you need to wait at least 14 days for your influenza vaccine or another vaccine, any other vaccine that you want to get. So if you're waiting to get your COVID vaccine and you know it's going to be more than 14 days and you haven't got your flu vaccine, you should go out and get your flu vaccine. The New York State surveillance numbers show that there have been hospitalizations associated with influenza. So if COVID is spreading out there, influenza spread the same way. So everybody, take the opportunity to go get your flu vaccine and at least protect yourself from that while you can.
Okay. All right. Dr. Syed, we actually have a follow-up question for you on a comment that you had made, if you don't mind. Masking, you said masking must continue after having been vaccinated. Virus is shed if person is asymptomatic. That means the people still contract the disease?
So we know that the vaccinations are preventing the disease and are preventing severe disease in most of these studies. But what we don't know is if they are in fact preventing asymptomatic transmission. As we mentioned before, if somebody contracts, the virus, and about 50%, CDC estimates that about 50% of transmission is being driven by people who are asymptomatic, either asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic. So until we have that specific data, which we will have once majority of the population and we're able to see what's happening, are we really in fact curbing not only the disease but the asymptomatic transmission as well? We need to be vigilant and keep the mask on because we want to make sure we protect everybody. And again, remember, there are people that are more vulnerable to this disease. So until we reach that threshold of herd immunity, it's really important that we continue our good infection prevention measures.
And actually, the next question was sort of on point. When can we stop using the masks? What's your recommendation?
We don't have that answer just yet. We're going to have to wait. We're going to have to sit tight and wait till, like I said, majority of the population is vaccinated and we can, in fact, show that the disease is not prevalent in the community, that we've broken that link, in this virus transmission, and that, we do have, this sort of behind us. So it's definitely not going to be before the fall, I can tell you that.
Okay, thank you, doctor. How does a person document their special medical need for the vaccine?
I think there's probably going to be a checklist when it gets past the 1B category as to who are you, what is your risk, and why are you there to get a vaccine. And I think it's going to be a partnership between their patients, their physicians, and whoever is administering the vaccine. So I don't have the answers exactly how it's going to roll out, but I suspect it will be that you've met criteria based on your self-report of, yes, I have diabetes, yes, I have heart disease, I have lung issues, etc. And I think that's really going to help. It really will require some information about the patient in order to meet those criteria of, yes, you should get a vaccine now.
Okay. Public schools mandate vaccinations. Will this be one of them? At this point, first of all, it's the vaccine is not eligible to most children in public schools, and secondly, there's a long line for the vaccines right now. So I'm not aware of anything moving in that direction at this point in time. I think we will just have to wait and see. Hopefully we will be at a point where we can eradicate this virus as quickly as possible, and we get as many people to, voluntarily take the vaccine. And again, it isn't something that's being administered to most children right now anyway. Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
Other than to add, by the time the studies are done and we have it available for children, we might also have a better understanding of children's role as spreaders and the benefits for them. So, but absolutely, it's going to be a while to even know those answers.
Right, and I can tell you, as one of the 63 state senators, that is not a public policy issue that anybody is discussing right now. We're just really concerned with, as it relates to this issue, how quickly can we get the resources to get the vaccine out. We're looking at the federal government just passed a bill to provide additional relief for Americans, and we're looking at it right now to see has it provided the money that we need to distribute this vaccine, because governor says it's going to be $1 billion. And as you know, we've got a $15 billion hole right now. So that'll, we'll be digging deeper if we're not getting money for that. So I think right now, public policy is, let's try to get this vaccine to as many people as quickly as possible in an order that, makes some sense. Should the United States be closing off trips from the United Kingdom? Okay, well, as the policymaker, I don't have the authority to cancel flights. That, I guess, that could be done by Congress or by the president through an executive order. As a citizen, maybe we should. It does seem like something that could be, an issue, or at least I see the governor is now looking to try to have people tested when they come into New York, and then quarantine. Anybody have thoughts on that?
At this time, I think everybody should just, be limiting any kind of non-essential travel, and so whether it's the United Kingdom or whether it's somewhere else. I mean, there's talk of this new strain, and I'm presuming that's why the question regarding specifically the United Kingdom. And we say new strain, but we should probably really say new mutation. Sort of a strain, kind of changing of a strain indicates that there's a more substantial genetic issue, and that it could escape your immune response. So really, we should sort of be talking about a mutation. And if you look, there's this virus has been sequenced, throughout the globe, and there's actual, websites that show all the different variations and mutations and different lineages of the virus. So there's tons of different lineages of this virus all over the world. So I would say if you want to completely stop travel, you'd have to stop travel from everywhere, not just from the United Kingdom.
Right.
Hopefully, I think we need to really focus on getting the vaccine out there, getting the vaccine to the entire world, in order to get things, as close to back to normal as we can.
Okay. Well, we have run through all the questions. I would just ask if any of you have any closing comments, or I know Dr. Shah, you had thought maybe some of the others that maybe you might want to share some common questions that you're being asked that weren't, raised during this. So why don't I just start with the screen, and my screen, and start with, and thank again so much Dr. Krief. Eve?
As far as closing remarks, again, I just want to emphasize that, as we heard, the vaccine might not be available to the general public for another 6 months. So as I said earlier, it's super, super important for us to also really be very vigilant, especially now while the numbers are rising, to continue wearing those masks and social distancing and washing hands, and we'll be doing that for the foreseeable future, again, even once we've been vaccinated and beyond, until we know that it's safe to be able to stop doing that. And again, have those outdoor activities. If you're in a carpool, if you must have a carpool with another child, children should wear masks in the car, have the windows open a crack. Just think about everything you're doing, and keep your immediate family safe and fairly isolated right now. And again, another thing I want to emphasize that really hasn't been touched upon, many people really are assuming that children are not affected by the virus, and wonder about the need for them to get vaccinated in the future. And I would just remind people that although children have been much less affected, or much less likely to get seriously sick or die from the virus, 133 children have died. Over 1,000 have had that multi-inflammatory syndrome in children that we see, with some reports of children having long-term neurological or cardiac effects, long haulers even in children. So not everything is known, and if we can protect children from this at some point with a vaccine, if it is found to be safe in trials, that's something we need to think about as well.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. Dr. Shah.
I just want to thank you, Senator Gaughran, for hosting this forum, and I want to remind everyone who's listening that really, as a consequence of the pandemic, one of the things that we've seen is a significant drop in the number of standard childhood immunizations that are being administered to children. So while this is a forum that's obviously been focusing on the novel COVID vaccine, I think it's really important to emphasize to all the parents out there to make sure that their children are going to the pediatrician, and that they're staying current with their schedule for their standard vaccination series, because the drop-offs have really been dramatic. And the last thing we want to do is layer an epidemic of a vaccine preventable disease on top of the pandemic of coronavirus.
Right. Thank you again, Doctor. Dr. Rubin?
Yes, another way to think about this vaccine is think of it as an insurance policy. So even if you are not a person who is at high risk by virtue of age or underlying conditions, you've got the potential opportunity to have a 95% effective vaccine. And we know that people of all age groups, including children, can develop severe disease. So another way to think about this is just an insurance policy, like you wear a seatbelt when you go in your car, or you insist your child has a helmet on when he rides his bicycle.
Thank you, Doctor. Dr. Nachman, again, thank you so much.
So I just want to remind people, when I hear someone say, oh, the vaccine is a miracle, I want to take a step back and say, no, the vaccine is good science. The way it was developed has been years in the making, with thousands and thousands of man-hours in the labs, understanding, studying viruses, studying how to make messenger RNA and packaging it so that we were able to reap the benefits of all of those hours of blood, sweat, and tear on the face of scientists to get us to where we are. So the vaccine is not a miracle, but it is great science.
Thank you again, Doctor. And Dr. Syed?
Thank you so much, Senator Gaughran, for this amazing opportunity. I just want to end with a little bit of hope and just sort of give a little perspective. You know, we went through the most difficult times last spring in New York, and we really collectively came together and got this virus, you know, the community transmission really low. We were able to really enjoy the summer and reap the benefits of being in this beautiful Long Island area that we live in. Unfortunately, as the weather has changed, you know, I'm seeing significant amount of surges in COVID-19 in the hospitals, and this is not unexpected, but so much of this is behavioral, and so much of this is, you know, what we need everyone to really chime in and do their little part, because although we do have the vaccines and we need everybody to really get vaccinated, the effects from the vaccines are going to take some time for us to really see the benefits. So what we need now is for people to really continue what Dr. Krief was mentioning before, the really good infection prevention measures, avoid those things that really transmit the virus, and really try to get this under control, because we are seeing significant increase in cases in our hospitals, family members all coming in, multiple members of the family all sick. I mean, you're fine until the next day when you're not. So people need to remember that we really do not have a cure for this virus still. Although we've made many advances on the therapeutic ends, we still do not have anything that's 100% curative, and people are still losing their lives to this virus. So we need everyone to just hang in there a little bit longer, and just for all of us to do our part.
Thank you, Doctor. Dr. Nolan, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Gaughran. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak. Even though I'm not on Long Island, I'm in Westchester, but I appreciate
Thank you for joining us on Long Island over the sound.
So I work with Dr. Shah. So, but I just have to echo everything everyone has said here. And you know, I deal with infection control at our hospital, as well as in our outpatient practices. And you know what, I have not seen, you know, transmission from our patients to our physicians, because we're in our practitioners, because we're wearing our personal protective equipment. But where our workers are getting this virus is from lapses in that during breaks and that sort of thing, and in the community with their own families and friends and that sort of thing. And so really, with the holidays coming and people wanting to gather, and I understand how much everybody wants to do that. The numbers right now and the amount of disease out there is so high throughout the United States, and rising every day here in New York. And we're really seeing a significant impact. You really just have to presume that everyone you encounter could be incubating this virus, and they may not show symptoms, but they could spread it to you, and then you spread it to grandma or the baby, or, you know, someone who ends up in the hospital with this. So it's a very, you know, severe thing that we see on the hospital side, and not everyone sees that. And, you know, we just really have to be really cautious, especially in the coming weeks and throughout the holidays. And as much as we want to gather with everyone, and as much as Zoom doesn't make it great, you know, it has to, you know, it is an opportunity to stay socially engaged with people, and safe. And the key is to really not spread this to others and keep everyone safe.
Well, thank you so much, Doctor. And Dr. Krilov.
First of all, thank you so much, Senator, for putting this together. I think the biggest thing we can do is keep lines open, inform everybody of the facts and their concerns. Other than that, I can only echo what my colleagues have said. Although the vaccine is a wonderful start, to paraphrase Churchill, it's not the end. It's not even the beginning of the end. It might be the end of the beginning. So keep all those precautions in mind, stay safe. And we know social distancing works. We know masks work. We know hand washing works. And we just have to keep together. And as tiring as it's gotten for all of us, we just have to continue to fight through this together.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Doctor. And I want to thank everyone. I want to thank my staff. It's also helped. I know Dr. Ferrone. No, okay, Mario Ferrone. One day he might be a doctor. And Kevin and everyone. And but I really want to thank everybody who participated. And this has been wonderful. We hear so much. We hear so much out there on the media, and as citizens, and as a senator, we get bombarded with so much information about this and disinformation and good information, and I think this type of a dialogue is just so valuable. You all have brought so much leadership to this issue, and so I am very grateful, and I know the people I represent are grateful, and we'll continue to call you and ask for your thoughts. And maybe we can do this in a couple of months when we're in a much better shape, and we can talk about the success that we had as we move forward. But again, thank you all so much, and for everyone who's listening, feel free to contact my office. Any specifics you have, we'll try to get you the answers to your questions. Including what the priorities may be for you as an individual in terms of when you can be administered the vaccine. All right, thanks so much, and everyone have a great night and a great holiday season. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, and let's hope we have a much greater 2021 as it relates to a lot of issues in this country, including this, than 2020. All right, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.